You ever see someone get mocked so bad in public it makes your stomach twist? I did, and what happened next, no one on that job site will ever forget. It started like any other blazing hot afternoon in Ironwood, Montana. Dust clung to everything, faces, trucks, even the air felt gritty. And there she was, walking steady down the sidewalk, alone, like always. Worn jeans, sun-faded tee, and a limp that told a story no one bothered to ask about. Her name was Sarah Connelly. But to the guy swinging hammers behind the chain-link fence, she was just another stray, in their words. You see, Sarah's left leg was gone below the knee. In its place, a black prosthetic clicked with each step. Not loudly, but just enough to make people notice, especially the ones who wanted to mock. "Someone call the VA," the foreman barked, loud and smug, like he was hosting open mic night at a dive bar. "Looks like one of their wind-up toys got loose." The laughter exploded. Guys hooting from scaffolding, one of them even mimicking her limp like it was some kind of joke. Another made a fake fall, screaming like a clown while the rest howled. Sarah didn't flinch, didn't say a word. She gripped the brim of that old green cap in her hand, a Marine Corps cap, though none of them knew or cared, and just kept walking, her jaw locked, eyes forward. No tears, no reaction. But here's the thing. That silence, it wasn't weakness. It was something else, something harder. You see, those men didn't know that Sarah once pulled a screaming soldier out of a burning vehicle in Kandahar, that she'd been blown off her feet by a roadside bomb and woke up in Germany missing part of herself. They didn't know the pain she lived through, or the nights she spent staring out the window of her tiny apartment just trying to breathe through the memories. But I knew, and so did someone else. That day, I happened to be across the street, just another guy sitting in a parked SUV. Except I wasn't just anybody. My name's Mason Carter, former Navy SEAL, and I owed that woman my life. From inside my vehicle, I watched those so-called men tear her down like she was nothing. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. I'd seen real war, real courage, and Sarah Connelly, she was made of it. Hell, she carried half my squad out of a kill zone while bullets ripped through the air like paper shredders. So, when she passed that job site like a ghost, and they laughed like she was some kind of freak, I made a call. No hesitation. "It's Carter," I said into the phone. "Roll out. Right now." 15 minutes later, they showed up. 3 matte black SUVs. No markings, no fanfare. Just presence. You know the kind that makes the air go still? That was it. The vehicles stopped dead across the entrance to the site. Every wrench dropped. Every joke froze in the air. Then 7 men stepped out, like shadows taking shape. Tactical pants, boots that knew how to walk with purpose. Not angry, not loud, just steady. They didn't say who they were. They didn't need to. Even from a block away, Sarah heard the silence behind her shift. She turned slowly, and when she saw them, her breath caught. And then I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "Who disrespected Staff Sergeant Connelly?" I asked. The foreman, yeah, the same one who just called her a wind-up toy, suddenly looked like a kid caught with matches. "It was just a joke, man," he stammered. "Nobody meant nothing." I stepped in closer. "You think Fallujah was a joke? You think dragging wounded bodies out of fire is funny?" Silence. "She saved lives, mine included. She lost a leg doing it, and you clowns laughed?" No one moved. One of my guys pulled up his phone. "We recorded everything," he said. "Every slur, every laugh, every insult. You could feel the panic ripple through them like a cold wind. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding everyone watching what respect looks like." That's when I walked away from the foreman, away from the sight, and toward her. Sarah hadn't spoken a word yet, but when I got close enough, she looked at me. Not confused, not scared, just tired. Tired in a way only someone who's carried too much can be. "Permission to honor you, ma'am," I said, standing at full attention. Her eyes widened. Then I raised my hand in salute. And behind me, every one of my men did the same. Right there, in the middle of a sidewalk covered in red dust and old jeers, Sarah Connelly received the salute she had earned years ago on a battlefield no one at that site had ever stepped foot on. And for the first time in a long time, she saluted back. Not because she wanted recognition, but because some things, when earned, must be honored. That was the day Ironwood got quiet. But it was just the beginning. The moment that salute happened, everything shifted. People who had stood by, laughing or silent, were now glued to the scene. Some with shame in their eyes, others still trying to understand what they just witnessed. Sarah lowered her hand slowly. You could see her chest rise and fall like she was holding in something big. Not tears, she didn't cry in public, but something just as heavy. I reached into the pocket of my vest and pulled out a silver coin, smooth and cool in the palm of my hand. It was engraved with a trident, our unit symbol. I held it out between both hands and stepped toward her. "This is a brotherhood coin," I said. "Seal issue. It's not given, it's earned." She hesitated for just a second, then let me fold it into her palm. "You earned it back in Kandahar, but you were too busy saving lives to get it." Sarah didn't say anything, didn't need to. The way she looked at that coin, like it weighed more than gold, said everything. And around us, the world had gone silent. The same teen girl who'd filmed her earlier, yeah, the one who whispered about RoboCop lady, now held her phone down at her side, face flushed red with guilt. And for the first time in years, Sarah Connelly wasn't just a stranger limping down the street. She was seen, fully, truly. Not as a symbol, not as a charity case, but as a damn hero. By the next morning, everything had gone viral. Clips of our confrontation were everywhere. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, even news stations picked it up. Headlines read, "SEAL Team Confronts Construction Crew for Mocking Disabled Veteran." Others said, "Woman who saved lives gets the honor she deserves." You know what hit the hardest? It wasn't just the views or shares. It was the comments. Thousands of them, from veterans, nurses, teachers, even teenagers, all saying the same thing. "Thank you for showing us what respect looks like." The construction company? Oh, they reacted fast, real fast. By noon, the foreman, his name was Derek Baines, had been removed from the project. Official statement hit their website within 24 hours. "We deeply regret the behavior displayed towards Staff Sergeant Sarah Connelly. Her courage and service deserve reverence, not ridicule. We are taking immediate action." But it didn't stop there. 1 week later, Sarah got an email. It wasn't from a news station, not from a government office. It was from the principal of Ridgeview High School, just 2 miles from that job site. They wanted her to speak during Veterans Appreciation Week. At first, she almost declined. Public speaking wasn't her thing. She hadn't stood in front of a crowd since the day she got her discharge papers. But something about that invitation, it felt different. It wasn't about medals or pity. It was about truth. She agreed. On a cool Thursday morning, she stood on the stage of the Ridgeview Auditorium. No fanfare, no spotlight, just a clean blouse, black slacks, and that same marine cap, finally back on her head after more than a decade. The students were silent. Not fidgeting, not whispering. Silent. Sarah didn't give a speech about battle or blood, no photos. No stories of bombs or prosthetics. She said this: "Scars don't mean you're broken. They mean you survived something that tried to break you, and you kept walking." You could hear a pin drop. Then someone stood up, applauded. Another followed. Then the whole room. Students, teachers, janitors, people who'd never seen war but finally understood what it meant to live through one. And back at the construction site, change took root, not in words, but in stone. At the entrance gate set into the sidewalk, the company embedded a single brick. Nothing flashy, no plaque, just a name, engraved deep and clean. SSG Sarah Connelly, built on respect. Every worker passed it daily. Some ignored it, some nodded. Others, they paused, stared. A few even laid a hand on it before clocking in, like a silent promise to do better. What started as a cruel joke turned into a living monument. But the real shift, the one that mattered most, came quietly. A few of the younger guys at the site started asking questions, not just about what happened that day, but about what they'd missed. Why no one had said anything sooner? Why no one had stood up? Then came a workshop. Not mandatory, not corporate. It was called Respect in the Trades. Rough hands, calloused knuckles, hard hats, and long pauses. The first session was stiff, awkward. Then a worker named Lewis, older guy, maybe 50, stood up and said, "My brother was a Marine too, lost his leg, got turned down at 5 job interviews, all because he couldn't pass a safety review." That cracked something open. By the second session, they weren't just listening, they were talking, sharing regrets, times they should have spoken up and didn't. No one asked Sarah to come speak to them. She wouldn't have anyway. That wasn't her way. But they started carrying her story with them like a compass. 6 weeks later, she was sitting at a cafe, just her, a cup of coffee, and a paperback she was halfway through when a boy walked up. 7, maybe 8. Freckles across his nose, hoodie sleeve pushed up, revealing a prosthetic arm. "My mom says I'm like you," he said. Sarah looked up, eyebrows raised. "She says I don't need 2 arms to be strong. She says maybe I can be a hero too." She leaned forward, voice steady, eyes soft. "You already are," she told him. "Every day you wake up and keep going, that's what heroes do." The kid lit up like a sunrise, ran back to his mom, who stood a few steps away, wiping tears from her eyes. And just like that, Sarah Connelly became something she never asked to be, a reminder that dignity doesn't come from medals, that respect isn't a luxury, that sometimes real heroes don't wear capes or stand on stages. They walk past you on a dusty sidewalk with a limp and a story you'll never forget. 6 months later, Sarah found herself standing backstage at the National Veterans Conference in Washington, D.C. It still didn't feel real. She didn't have a book deal, no agent, no viral TED Talk, just a lifetime of quiet service and a story that had finally been heard. And now, somehow, she was the keynote speaker. She wasn't polished, didn't rehearse in front of a mirror, or walk around with a speech in a leather binder. Sarah never wanted the spotlight. She didn't even like having her picture taken. But standing behind that curtain, holding her Marine cap in her hands, she knew this wasn't about her. Not really. It was about every vet who came home and felt invisible. Every person who had been dismissed, humiliated, or looked over because of how they walked, what they carried, or what they'd lost. This was for them. Out front, the auditorium was packed, rows of active-duty service members, veterans, military families, senators, and nonprofit leaders. But in the front row, 2 people Sarah recognized immediately. Mason Carter sat in full dress uniform, spine straight, arms crossed respectfully over his chest. Beside him was the little boy from the cafe. This time, he wore a tiny Marine Corps jacket his mom had stitched by hand, his prosthetic arm peeking proudly from the sleeve. He held something shiny in his small palm, the challenge coin Sarah had given him the second time they met. His fingers curled around it like it was the most valuable thing in the world. She stepped into the light. No music, no fancy intro, just her. The crowd hushed. Sarah looked out at the sea of faces, some young, some old, some missing limbs, others holding on to medals. She took a breath, then another, and began. "I used to think honor came from medals," she said, her voice calm and clear. "From stripes, salutes, and standing tall." She paused. "But I've learned that honor doesn't depend on how many limbs you have or how straight you stand. It comes from how you face the storm when everything tries to break you." The silence in the room was electric. You could feel people leaning in, holding their breath. Some of us come home whole. Some of us don't. Some scars you can see, some you can't. But all of them matter. She glanced at the boy, whose eyes never left her. He sat up straighter. "Courage doesn't always roar," she continued. "Sometimes it walks with a limp, and sometimes it wears a red hoodie and holds its head high." The boy's face lit up, not just with pride, but with understanding. He wasn't just hearing words, he was seeing himself in them. The applause didn't start with a bang. It started small, one pair of hands, then another. But within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. A standing ovation that roared like thunder. Not for a celebrity, not for a speech, but for the truth. Sarah stepped back from the mic, letting the moment breathe. She didn't bask in it. She didn't need to. Because for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't walking alone. From that day forward, the brick at the construction site became more than just a slab in the sidewalk. It became a destination, a symbol. Veterans from all over the state, and soon from across the country, started making trips to see it. Some arrived on motorcycles, jackets patched with old unit insignias. Others came quietly, using canes, walkers, or leaning on the arm of a loved one. Some touched the brick with trembling hands. Others just stood there, tears in their eyes, nodding like they finally felt seen. Schools started organizing field trips to the site. Teachers brought lesson plans. Families brought flowers. The construction company expanded its respect in the trades training to every regional site they managed. And something deeper began to take root. Not just corporate accountability, but real cultural change. And Sarah? She stayed mostly out of the spotlight. She didn't want a talk show circuit or a best-selling memoir. She still lived in her modest apartment, still rode the same bus to the VA on Tuesdays, still carried that same cap, though now she sometimes wore it with pride. She had become something more powerful than a symbol. She had become a standard. Then something unexpected happened. It started online, a quiet trend. A single phrase posted by that same teenager who'd once filmed her on the sidewalk. The girl who had whispered, "This is going viral," with a smirk. Now she wrote, "Let respect be louder than laughter." That phrase caught fire. Hashtag "Let respect be louder" began to trend. And with it, thousands of stories poured in. Veterans, nurses, burn survivors, cancer fighters, firefighters, people with prosthetics, people with scars, people who had been laughed at, dismissed, ignored, and were still standing. Not in spite of their wounds, but because of them. And that's when the movement began. Not a protest, not a campaign, a reminder. A ripple that spread through job sites, classrooms, office buildings, and family homes. That sometimes dignity isn't something you wait to be given. Sometimes you have to stand tall and claim it, even if you do it with a limp. Months passed. The world kept moving, as it always does. Headlines shifted, viral clips got replaced by new ones. But something about Sarah's story stuck. Maybe because it wasn't about outrage, it was about reckoning. Maybe because it didn't end in bitterness, it ended in something better. Hope. One afternoon, as the fall wind picked up across Ironwood's Main Street, a delivery truck rolled past the construction site. The driver slowed down, not because of traffic, but because he wanted to see the brick. It had become a local landmark. People stopped to take pictures, lay flowers, or just stand quietly for a moment. And the inscription, simple and strong, never faded. SSG Sarah Connelly, built on respect. But behind that engraved name was something far more powerful: action. You see, the site manager, who had once stayed silent when Sarah was mocked, now ran the company's new veteran hiring initiative. The same workers who once laughed on the scaffolding were now volunteering with local vets. And the teenager who once whispered "RoboCop lady," she now ran a TikTok page dedicated to telling the stories of wounded heroes across the country. None of them were forced to change. They just did. Because once you see dignity disrespected and then truly honored, you can't unsee it. And then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope. No government seal, no special stamp, just a handwritten return address from a tiny school in Kansas. A 6th-grade teacher had written, "Our class saw the video. We didn't know what a challenge coin was. We didn't know what a salute meant, but now we do. We think Sarah is a real superhero. Could you ask her to come visit us?" Sarah read it 3 times. She didn't respond with a speech or a public statement. She packed her bag, grabbed her cap, and booked a ticket. 2 weeks later, she stood in front of 30 kids in a small gymnasium. No cameras, no reporters, just crayons, backpacks, and wide eyes. And this time, when she told them that scars were proof of survival, their little hands shot up, not with questions about the war, but with pride. "My dad lost his leg too. My aunt has a prosthetic arm like yours. Does that coin make you a superhero?" Sarah smiled. "No," she said, "that coin means I didn't quit, and neither should you." One boy, maybe 10 years old, held up his hand shyly. "Do you think I can be strong even though I get teased for how I walk?" She walked over, knelt down next to him, and said, "You already are." That boy later told his teacher he was going to make his own brick with his name on it and write, "Built on Strength." Sarah left Kansas with more than thank you notes. She left knowing that the ripple kept going. And then came Washington again. Only this time, she wasn't the speaker. She was the honoree. A national nonprofit had invited her to attend their annual Heroes Among Us. She almost said no. Fame still made her uncomfortable, but when she heard the boy from the cafe was going to be there, she couldn't resist. He was 10 now, taller, more confident, and wearing that same tiny marine jacket, only now it fit a little tighter. As the lights dimmed and the announcer introduced her, Sarah stepped onto the stage one more time. No prepared remarks, just a story. She told the room what it was like to be mocked in daylight. What it felt like to hold your silence, not out of weakness, but out of discipline. What it meant to be recognized, not with medals, but with respect. And what happened next left the room speechless. As she finished, the boy walked onto the stage beside her. He didn't say anything at first, just looked up at her with that same proud gaze. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out the coin. "I still carry it," he said softly into the mic, "because every time I feel like I can't keep going, I remember you did." The applause started again, but this time Sarah raised her hand to quiet the crowd. "Don't clap for me," she said. "Clap for every person who gets up when they don't feel like it. For every vet who's still fighting battles nobody sees. For every kid who holds their head high when the world tells them to hang it low." And they did. The room erupted, not for the image of a wounded soldier, but for the message she carried. A message that said, dignity doesn't need permission. Respect doesn't need a spotlight. And strength? It often walks quietly, clicks with every step, and doesn't ask to be noticed. Later that night, as Sarah sat beneath the stars outside the hotel, she finally let herself feel it. Not grief, not pain, not even pride, but peace. Because for once, she didn't have to carry the weight alone. There were others now, others who understood, others who were building something stronger, on stone, on scars, on stories told out loud. It's been a year since that day at the construction site, the day one woman's silence thundered louder than 100 jeers. In that time, something remarkable happened. Not viral, not flashy, but real. Sarah Connelly's story became more than a memory. It became a movement. Across small towns and big cities, workplaces began reevaluating how they trained, how they listened, how they respected. Construction crews in Indiana held toolbox talks about dignity. A hospital in Arizona created a hallway of honor for disabled veterans working in civilian roles. Schools from Maine to Oregon used Sarah's story to teach students about resilience, not from a textbook, but from truth. And the brick? It became a pilgrimage. People came from across the country, not to worship it, but to remember, to stand still, to touch its cool surface and remind themselves what courage actually looks like. One day, a retired Army nurse from Georgia showed up. She laid a single rose beside it, whispered, "Thank you for speaking for all of us," and left. Another day, a busload of high school seniors pulled up, each of them taking turns reading the inscription out loud, one by one. Not everyone understood, but the ones who needed it, they felt it like fire in the chest. Sarah still never called herself a hero. If you asked her, she'd say she was just doing what she was trained to do. Keep going, keep showing up, even when no one's clapping. But the world saw more. The nonprofit that honored her began a grant program in her name. The Connelly Fund now helps wounded veterans transition back to civilian careers, especially in trades and construction. One of the first recipients was a young woman named Naomi, also a Marine amputee, who stood on her new job site in Ohio and said, "I used to be scared they'd laugh. Now I know they can't afford to." And Mason Carter? He kept the brotherhood coin tradition alive, but with a twist. He added a second version, smaller, rounder, engraved with a single phrase on one side. "Let respect be louder." He gives them out sparingly, not for heroics on the battlefield, but for courage in everyday places. A teacher who defended a disabled student, a mechanic who hired a vet when others passed, a boy with a prosthetic arm who told his entire class that he felt proud of it. And at the center of it all, still walking the streets of Ironwood, still visiting the VA every Tuesday, still quietly making ripples, was Sarah. One crisp autumn morning, she walked past the construction site again. New workers were there now, younger crew, more diverse. One of them glanced up, saw her, and paused mid-swing. He nodded. "Mornin', ma'am," he said. No laughter, no mocking, just simple, quiet recognition. She nodded back and kept walking. Later that week, a reporter asked her if she ever imagined her story would reach so many. Sarah shrugged, thoughtful. "I never needed the world to know my name," she said. "I just needed the world to remember what respect looks like." The interview went viral again, but that didn't change Sarah. She still lived in the same small apartment, still wore the same sun-faded Marine cap, still sat by her window at night, sometimes staring out at headlights cutting through the blinds like spotlights sweeping a compound. But now there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't watching for ghosts anymore. She was watching for signs of change, and they were everywhere. So let me ask you, you watching right now, have you seen someone get mocked, belittled, or pushed aside simply because they were different? Did you speak up? Did you wish you had? Because this story, Sarah's story, isn't about going viral. It's not about punishment. It's not even about a salute or a coin. It's about what happens when we finally start seeing each other, really seeing each other, for the battles we faced and the quiet strength we carry. So if this story moved you, share it. Not for clout, but so someone else, someone who's limping a little through life, can hear it and think, maybe I'm not alone. Because maybe the bravest thing we can do in this loud, fast world is slow down. Look someone in the eye and say, I see you. Respect doesn't take much, but it changes everything. If this story touched your heart, hit subscribe to never miss more true, powerful, and inspiring stories of courage, resilience, and humanity. Because sometimes the right story at the right time can change someone's whole day.